Good afternoon. Welcome to the 28th Annual Paul B. Henry Lecture. My name is Micah Watson, and I direct the Paul B. Henry Institute for the Study of Christianity and Politics. Paul Henry was a political science professor at Calvin College in the 1970s, and then served in the Michigan State Legislature before representing Grand Rapids in Congress from 1985 to 1993, when he left us far too early at the age of 51. The namesake of our institution, John Calvin, wrote that, quote, "Civil authority is a calling, not only holy and lawful before God, but also the most sacred and by far the most honorable of all the callings in the life of mortal men," end quote. You won't be surprised to learn this is one of the favorite quotes for the political science department, and it is actually framed in our office. But even we think that Calvin may have gone a little bit too far with the by far and most sacred. Nevertheless, public service can be a God-honoring calling, and Paul Henry, in the years in which he served in Michigan and in our nation's capital, left a mark on all who knew him and served with him from either side of the political aisle. He was a careful thinker, a measured but powerful speaker, erratic and thoughtful with those with whom he disagreed. He was a Republican and a conservative, but he was first of all a Christian, and he was not afraid to diverge from his party when his conscience demanded it, whether that was regarding environmental matters, aid to Detroit, the MX missile, or aid to the Nicaraguan Contras. By the way, he was for aid to Detroit. He opposed aid to the Contras. He supported his party, but was not beholden to it, something rare in his day and unfortunately even rarer today. We do well to remember him and his example. And if you want to learn more about his thought, there are books of his edited by my colleague Doug Copeman, free out on the table. I would encourage you to take one. Before introducing today's speakers, I'd also like to recognize Karen Henry Stokes, Paul's wife and an enduring friend to Calvin and the Henry Institute, supporting students and remaining active in our community. Karen, we are so glad you're here with us. This is one of the favorite parts of my job, is being able to say hello and thank you for being with us today. Today's subject was very important to Paul Henry and fits in very nicely with the ethos of the Institute. It was another Paul Hilligans, who introduced Paul Henry to the importance of corrections and prisons, such that Paul served on the Corrections Committee for the Michigan House and Senate. One of God's standards for measuring Christian compassion and responsibility, Paul wrote in the Banner in 1980, is the degree to which we respond to the needs of the lonely and forgotten. When the cold gray steel doors of a prison cell slam shut, all too often there is no echo, only silence. As difficult as it may be for us, may God give us the grace to minister to the needs of the people behind those bars. In the 45 years since Paul wrote those words, God has given some grace to minister. And in the last 10 years, one of those means of grace has been the Calvin Prison Initiative, a joint venture of Calvin Seminary and Calvin University, working in cooperation with the MDOC, the Michigan Department of Corrections. And I want to say a warm welcome. We're honored this afternoon to have with us Director Heidi Washington of the MDOC. Director Washington, thank you for being here with us this afternoon and for your ongoing partnership. I'm excited about our panel, which consists of Calvin's Todd Chaffee, one of CPI's original directors and current senior advisor, as well as professor of Congregational and Ministry Studies. So I think that's changed now. Ministry leadership, thank you. Joining Todd is Sean England, who is currently a student at Calvin Theological Seminary and an alumnus of Calvin University and the first cohort of CPI students. I had the privilege of having Sean in a couple classes his senior year, and he is one of the sharpest students I have had on any campus, the sort of student who makes one wonder if a PhD has really prepared you for a student such as him. And finally, we are particularly excited to welcome Warden Noah Nagy. Warden Nagy has been the warden at Parnell Correctional Facility in Jackson, Michigan for 8 years and has been working in the MDOC for 30 years in a host of positions. He is a 1994 graduate of Grand Valley State University, where he also served on their alumni board of directors for 8 years. He and his wife are active in the Jackson area, including spearheading an organization that makes possible scholarships for graduating high school seniors. Thank you for being here, Warden Nagy. At this point, I will turn things over to Todd, but would you please join me in welcoming our panel?
There. What I'd like to do is first just describe a little bit about how we'll spend our time together this afternoon. I would love to take about 15 or 20 minutes and frame the issue of incarceration in the United States and in Michigan. Along the way, I'd like to talk about some of the programs now that we find work very well in the prisons in Michigan, namely Calvin Prison Initiative. And then I want to talk a little bit about why I think CPI is special, about why CPI, in my estimation, has been very successful over now 10 years. So after about 15 or 20 minutes of that, excuse me, then I'm going to join my colleagues over here, and I'm going to interview them. And in the interview process, we're going to have a conversation together, and we're going to do that for about 40 minutes or so, and then I'm going to open up the conversation to you. And you'll have an opportunity to ask questions, make comments. So I'm hoping that somewhere along the line of this presentation or what you hear up here, you'll have a question or want to make a comment. So mass incarceration, I assume a lot of you, if not all of you, have heard of mass incarceration, and that in the U.S. as well as other states around the country, we have observed mass incarceration probably starting since the late 70s, maybe mid-70s. And I want to give you just some numbers, just to give you a sense of what we're talking about. So in 1980 to 2024, the number of incarcerated people went from approximately 300,000 to 1.8 million. And so it jumps dramatically in a very short amount of time. In 2022, there were approximately 5.5 million Americans who were either behind bars in prisons or jails, on parole, or probation. So at its highest, the number at its highest, I read something years ago where it said basically 1 in every 31 Americans are under the umbrella of the criminal justice system in some way. So if you think of it in those terms, I don't know, how many people do we have here? 75, 100? Some of you have been under the criminal justice system at some point in your life, statistically speaking. Now, if you compare this to other countries, 2022, and you compare it per 100,000 people in that country, okay, so that's the number we're working with, 100,000. Italy incarcerates about 105 within 100,000. France, 106. United Kingdom, 134. United States, 453. And in 2008, the number is 1,000. So the U.S. incarcerates by far more than any other country in the world, and unfortunately, that often puts us on lists with other countries that we normally don't want to be on a list with. And we would like to think that we're different, but when it comes to incarceration, we're not. I read years ago, also again from one scholar, he said it's almost as if the U.S. is addicted to incarceration. And that was a very startling way to put it for me. Now, if we think about Michigan. So if you look at Michigan, from 1980 to 2022, we go from, sorry, I gotta get my glasses out. I am not able to read that number. What's that lowest number there? On the left? Okay, 36? 16, God, thank you very much. And then it goes up, and we were talking about this, Warden, earlier, that in about 2006, 2008, it peaks in Michigan in the low 50,000 mark. And so if you think just in terms of a few decades here, it jumps dramatically. Someone estimated that the cost of incarceration from 1980 to the peak in 2008 went up 5,000%. Just in Michigan. And we have people here who know this, but in Michigan, we spend 1/5 of our annual budget, $2 billion, on incarceration. And so it's a huge undertaking for the state of Michigan to do this. Now, I want to introduce you to some of our students. So I often at this point in this talk would say, here's what we're looking at in terms of mass incarceration at the national level. Here's what we're looking in terms of the state level. And then I want to introduce you to some of our students because they're the ones, of course, who are impacted by these incarceration rates. And the stories that they tell about now, what was it like to be incarcerated, perhaps incarcerated without hope, and now when they have an opportunity for a program, an opportunity to become their better selves, what is life like now? So this is our beginning to say, what should be our response to these big incarceration numbers in terms of a society is what we can do. So here's I want to introduce you to Wilson.
I grew up in Southwest Detroit. I grew up wanting to belong. I didn't have that family tie. As I grew older, the only individuals that I could find that acceptance from was the gang. There was a lot of gang activities going on, and eventually I was convicted and sentenced to life without parole. When I came to prison, what I ended up doing, anytime that I felt that there was any issue, any confrontations, I would just lash out. I assaulted a fellow inmate in 2010 at another facility from here. I'm in the hole, and you go into this whole thing of reflecting on your life. And I had that, what we call the aha moment. For me, it was 17 years into my prison bit. I told myself that that was gonna be it for me, that I knew I had to do something different. Unfortunately, at that time, the MDOC did not offer any programs to individuals doing life without possibility of parole. And I was transferred to another facility, and that's when I seen the CPI flyer. And for me, what stood out was that it said on the flyer, "Lifers welcome." When I received my acceptance letter, that to me was the point where you feel so good to be able to have a letter that says congratulations. And I grew up in a prison bit. I told myself that that was gonna be it for me, that I knew I had to do something different. Unfortunately, at that time, the MDOC did not offer any programs to individuals doing life without possibility of parole. And I was transferred to another facility, and that's when I seen the CPI flyer. And for me, what stood out was that it said on the flyer, "Lifers welcome." When I received my acceptance letter, that to me was the point where you feel so good to be able to have a letter that says congratulations. And I've said it before, I've never been congratulated for nothing. I feel that this education has equipped me because I've been taught through CPI how to travel the Bible. I've been taught through CPI about theology. And so now I'm able to do that for my fellow students, to do that for my fellow inmates, and they need that here. CPI and Calvin were the only individuals who saw worth in us as human beings, as fellow inmates, prisoners, but worthy of something. It's not just an education that's gonna have you get released and go to the world, but more so that if you're gonna stay here, that you can help change the culture in here. And that kind of sets it apart from every other program. And I think that if programs were to focus on that more, I think that we would actually not only change the prison culture, but also make a huge difference in society as well.
So two things at least I want you to notice about this. Wilson says that as a natural life sentence where he can't get parole, the natural life sentence, there were no programs available for him in Michigan. And so there was nothing really for him to do that in his mind would be constructive, that would help him be a better him. And thankfully, under Director Washington's leadership now, there are more and more programs available for people serving life sentences, natural life sentences. And so he was living with the fact that he would never get out of prison. What's the point of his life? What to do? When he finally came into the Calvin program, I remember he spent the first year timid and maybe a little suspicious. And after about the second year, he started to just blossom and flourish. And finally, by the time he graduated, he said, "My word, I found my calling in life, and it's to serve others." And so since graduation, he served at the Hamlin Prison, where our program is, and now just recently he was transferred to another prison to serve another community. And so now he's helping out with the Western Michigan University College program in that prison with some other Calvin grads. And so he is now fulfilling his calling, and he has purpose. Now, the program that we offer, I want to say just a few words about it. It's a 5-year program, full-time. Students go year-round, fall, spring, summer. And during that time, in the first 2 years, they earn 1 certificate per year. They finish a year of certificate, another year of certificate. That stacks together, if you will, and they get an associate's degree. And at the end of 5 years, they earn a bachelor's degree, and it's a double major: faith and community leadership and human services. So our program is really a leadership program. It's a servant leadership program. And no matter if a person, Wilson in this case, he's Muslim, but he has an active faith, and he wants to use this opportunity. He believes God has blessed him with this opportunity to serve. We have Muslims, we have Christians, we have people of no religious tradition. And so we say, if you're coming from a faith tradition, we want to kind of energize that sense of your faith in calling to serve. But if not, maybe there's a moral calling that you can serve and be a community leader. The human services major is very much like a social work major. And so that major came about because in Sean's early cohort and a couple others, they said, you know, it'd be really helpful for us is if we had a social work minor. And so we implemented a social work minor, and that turned in now to human services. It's a liberal arts program at its core. And so I've been really impressed with our students. We were talking about this earlier. Sean and other students in CPI would often say that as they were getting ready for, say, an exam in philosophy, they were getting ready in the morning in the bathroom area, maybe brushing teeth or whatever, and they were debating about the meaning of Plato's Republic. Or they would be having each other read their papers over and over again, checking it one last time, like any good student. Give me one more shot at this thing. And so the liberal arts really functioned as a way to allow them to be more human and to better understand what that might mean. I always tell professors when they teach for our program, I said, now, if you're going to go and teach for our program, these are the students you were dreaming of in grad school. When you had those dreams as you're looking out the window of the library, these are the students. Now, the majors, as I said, are really there to equip to serve. So we help develop a skill set for our students where they'll serve in 3 areas. One is ministry, one is academic work, tutoring, teaching assistant, that sort of thing, and one is peer mentoring. And so we find that in this program, the more we can build and help students build thicker relationships with each other, the more we can get them, frankly, to debate Plato's Republic or whatever and work together, they become a support and encourager for one another. And so peer mentoring, if you will, in lots of different areas is key to the success, I believe, of this program and the impact that one peer can have on another peer. So far, we've given out about 77 bachelor's degrees, 121 associates, and 159 certificates. And as I think I said earlier, June 1 of this year will be our now 10th year. And so we're actually completing the admissions process for our 11th cohort that will start this fall. All right, I want to introduce you now to James.
I'm from Jackson, Michigan. I grew up with a mentally handicapped brother, and so a lot of the attention kind of went to him. I kind of felt as if I didn't really find a place within my family, and so eventually I started to dabble in drugs a little bit. About the age of 15, I committed my first felony, and so I went to the youth home, and that began my whole experience in the judicial system. Eventually, I graduated to jail, and then from jail to prison. I did a two-year prison term. I came back to prison a second time. At that point, I kind of started to look at my life and think, wow, this is like becoming, a big problem for me. But I for whatever reason, I couldn't get rid of the drug habit. And then I committed the current offense that I'm serving time on now, which was a home invasion. And I remember laying on the jail room floor in the holding cell, just crying out to God and saying, God, I just cannot live this life anymore. I cannot continue down this path, and I want to do things your way from here on out. I went to court and I received a 20 to 40 year sentence. Once it was all said and done, the dust had settled, I was like, what do I do now? The chaplain came and seen me, and he said, would you like some visitors? So some visitors started to come see me, and he kept encouraging me to get involved in this program called TUMI, which was the Urban Ministers Institute. I loved the program. It was fruitful for me. And towards the end of it, there was news about the Calvin Prison Initiative, and it was just getting up and started. And so I went over there, I filled out the application, and a couple months later, I got the letter that I was accepted. I just remember reading that letter and thinking that this could be like a game changer for me. This could really set the foundation for a new life for me. Calvin comes in and they do something that's unique. They show us that we're human beings, that we have value, that we have worth, and that we have a purpose in life, and that we can step into that purpose. They've revealed to me that as long as I continue to make good decisions and move forward in life and not allow the past to dictate my future, that I can do anything that I want to do. I look at the person that made all those decisions in the past, and I feel as if I don't even know who that individual is. And I feel like I'm still serving time for decisions that somebody else made. It's just mind-boggling to me, the changes and transformations that I've made in the Calvin Prison Initiative.
So what we now know is that education is a powerful, powerful experience for those who are incarcerated. And in fact, out of the many things that different states in this country have tried over the decades, it seems like it's the most powerful. So the RAND Corporation, which is a nonpartisan think tank, did a meta-study of the impact of higher educational programming in prisons. And they found that this is extremely significant. Here's how they put it. If you think about it, roughly every year, about 650,000 people are paroled. Within 3 years, about 66%, or 2/3, will be rearrested and sent to prison. In 5 years, 75%. In 10 years, about 82%. So in terms of what we've been trying for decades, the outcome is not what we'd hope it would be. If you think about education now, someone who earns an associate's degree, only 14% go back to prison in 3 years. Bachelor's degree, just over 5%. And they've shown that if someone is able to earn a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in prison, the recidivism rate is virtually zero. So now we have data, we have a lot of support to suggest that programs like Calvin and many others now in Michigan, Western Michigan University, Grand Valley, many other schools now, this is having a tremendous impact, and we have the data to really believe that this is going to be highly successful. Bottom line, for every dollar spent on education in a prison system, in terms of incarceration costs, we save $4 to $5. So not only does it make sense on many levels, but it just finally makes sense on your pocketbook. That we spend a lot of money on incarceration. Well, we could save a lot of money on incarceration and rethink how to spend that money we save. Now, here's where I think Calvin is somewhat different from some of the programs. Here at Calvin, we believe education is really finally about spiritual and moral formation. So we have a mission statement here at Calvin. We want to equip students to think deeply, to act justly, to live wholeheartedly as Christ's agents of renewal in the world. Now, I've taught a lot of what they call DCM, Developing a Christian Mind, here at Calvin, first-year student, freshmen. It's when students come in, they get introduced to the mission of Calvin and what it would be to have a Christian worldview, and that statement comes up a lot, and the students on the main campus think, that's pretty neat, that's a nifty little statement. Sean, correct me if I'm wrong, but when we started flying this in front of our CPI students, they thought, wait a minute, what? Think deeply, act justly, live wholeheartedly as Christ's agents of renewal. Where's this been all my life? And they find that we had it up on the walls, and now if you talk to some of them, they start to give that back to us. So this is maybe the first time for a lot of them that they weren't just getting educated. They were being described a way of being human that allows them to flourish and allows them to serve others so that they can flourish, so that they can live wholeheartedly, live justly. And then for people of faith, they finally really now have a calling that even in prison, they can live as Christ's agent of renewal, even in prison. So I always like to say CPI is really not about education per se. I think what we're doing is we're building a spiritual and moral community by way of education. I frankly think that's what we're doing in the university main campus. That together we are a community that is asking, what does it really mean to be human? What does it really mean to live a good life? And for those of us with faith, of course, that means being in relationship with God. And then God says to us, live in relationship to others. Love your neighbor. Together, then, we flourish as a human community. And if you listen to Wilson in that first video I showed, why did he join a gang? He says because he wanted to belong. He had nowhere else to belong. And then he found CPI. And he found that community that gives him now the vision to live his life. In CPI, we always emphasize community. Being incarcerated can be often isolating. Even though a person is with literally hundreds of other prisoners in tight quarters at times, I'm told it can be very lonely. And so the one thing that we try to instill in everything we do with our program is a deep sense of community, which means we try to develop thick relationships. We try to develop thick friendships where we can kind of be together as that community. This is quick, but I just want to at least take note. There's been now research done more recently out of Baylor University in Texas on the impact of faith-based initiatives in prisons. And they've shown that one thing a faith-based program tends to want to do, whether it's a Christian ministry or a Christian educational program, whatever, it reduces social isolation, it provides pro-social interactions, and it often encourages peer mentoring, one peer to another peer. And so we have found this to be very true, that that's what CPI finally accomplishes, and the results are tremendous. And so in terms of the faith-based process, we think that this is kind of a special element that's happening even around the country, and the research now is starting to show it. Now, what if it's not faith-based? What if we're not talking about faith-based? I want to introduce you to Little Scandinavia. Some of you are going to know of this. We've learned over the years, more and more in this country, that there are prisons outside the U.S., Scandinavian prisons, that do incarceration very differently from the way we normally do it in the U.S. What do? Take a custody officer, a corrections officer. They begin to rethink the role that people in the system play. So instead of a corrections officer, they call it a contact officer. And it's a hybrid of both a corrections officer and counselors. And so even the frontline staff and officers now take on a little different role. They're not prisoners, they're residents. And so just the renaming and rethinking what it is you're to do in this set of relationships. And here's really, again, where I think the emphasis is. They put a lot of emphasis on the communal aspect of even lives in prison. So they share a kitchen, they share a living room, there's a group decision-making process. In some cases, I even saw Guys are able to order groceries. They can order what they want to eat, cook, share the food with one another. And so it's, in some ways, what people there have said, it's a normal lifestyle. It's a pro-social, normal lifestyle. Now, what's interesting is, outside of Philadelphia, at a prison, a medium security prison of about 1,300 inmates, they are doing a pilot program of a Scandinavian model. And so they, as they say, they're taking on a normal life. They order groceries, cook meals together. Each has a single room. In one case, they said that they allow a prisoner to choose what color the walls in the room should be. And they buy the paint and allow the guy to paint the room. They have common living spaces, common activities. Now here's what one resident says about this experience. It's more of a community. Barriers are broken down here. And here is what one officer had to say about this. I like the community feel. We're here to help. I like the fact that they trust us enough to open up. It's really a tight-knit community. So it seems to me, it seems to me that one thing we've discovered over these years, the research is tending to support it, is that one way to approach issues of crime and punishment through incarceration is to build into that incarceral experience a deep sense of community and thick relationship building. And together, seek what is the common good. And together, help one another flourish. And so that could happen either through a faith-based program like ours, but as we're learning with these little Scandinavia, it could also happen through a so-called secular program. So I'm going to turn it now over to our conversation, but I'm hoping there's somewhere along the line here, something to spark. You may have a question or a comment, and we're going to continue our discussion now. So, I would like them to get to know you. And so I would just like to ask the most basic question. Sean, at what age were you incarcerated? What was your sentence, and what was it like hearing that you are now going to prison?
I was 18 years old when I was sentenced to natural life without the possibility of parole. I was told that the only way I would get out of prison is a governor's pardon or a pine box. So when I went to prison, I lived my life accordingly. Prison, when I went, was a little different than it is now. This was in the early 90s, so the whole super predator mythos was being bandied about. I went to a place called Michigan Reformatory in Ionia, which was the real gladiator school. It was the level 4, so it was people who had long sentences, and you would go there and you had to do 10 years in a level 4. And when you stepped out of your cell, you had to prove yourself every single day. People came out of there generally with PTSD, right? They didn't like to be alone. They didn't like to have people sneak up on them. They didn't like to have their backs to crowds. Yeah, it was one of those situations that you adapted to as quickly as possible. And generally that meant turning off your emotions, isolating yourself. You always had to be careful what the person who was talking to you wanted, because everybody wants something. There's no such thing as a free lunch, so you don't take anyone at their word. You wait to see what they want before you commit. Generally, like Wilson was talking about, what they wanted was to use you in some way. So if you were a big white guy, then they might want you to beat people up or collect money or something. If you're a little white guy, they might want you for something else. If you were a black guy, they might want you for something else. But people always wanted you, so you didn't trust people. Very isolating.
Warden, how long have you been with the department? What positions have you held over the years? And now I know you're a warden. What's it been like being a warden?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say thanks for having me. On the list of things that I never thought I would be doing in my career, sitting at Kelvin College on the stage at a lecture is one of them. So it's certainly honored to be here. I started my career in 1995. I've been with the department. This is my 30th year now. I've had the good fortune of working in a lot of different roles and seeing all aspects of our department. I did start out in the facilities as an athletic director, transitioned over to corrections officer, and then was able to transition and spend some time out in the field, working in probation, both as an agent and a supervisor, and then transitioned into my first time I got to work with Director Washington was at the parole violation unit at RGC in Jackson, and dealing with individuals who were returned to prison after being out on parole. Then had an opportunity to work with our parole board and kind of understand that process and see how that worked. And then got back into the facilities as deputy warden. And the last 8 years, I've had the opportunity to be a warden at Lakeland Correctional Facility down in Coldwater, the Cotton Correctional Facility in Jackson, now the Parnell Correctional Facility, also in Jackson. As far as being a warden, it's one of the most rewarding jobs you can have. You're working with not only a population that is housed at the facility you're in charge of, and in my case, I have only almost 1,700 individuals that are housed there, but also almost 350 staff. And being able to get that growth, whether it's from someone that's participating in college, our vocational village, maybe it's something as getting a GED or completing a program for the first time, but being able to encourage those folks. And fortunately, where I'm at, we get the opportunity to see a lot of folks that parole into the community and see that success. Then same thing from the staff standpoint, working with staff and directing them, mentoring them to have career opportunities, whether it's up to custody ranks or non-custody ranks, whatever it may be. But you have the opportunity to have impact on a lot of different people in if you do it right, in a positive way.
Yep. So 30 years, it's a good bit of time, a good span. You've worked, as you said, in many, many roles. And in terms of what I noted earlier, you were kind of there at some of the movement of mass incarceration. What do you think in Michigan, what do you recall, what was the impetus, do you think, behind in moving that number of incarcerated well over 50,000, I think it was in 2008? How did you understand that as someone who works in corrections?
Well, again, at that point, when our numbers were probably at that 50,000 plus, I was in that probation agent role, parole supervisor role, working with individuals on the outside, and probably not in the mix, so to speak, of understanding it, like I do today. The one thing I do know that is, you had mentioned the department's budget. The department's budget has been around that number for a very long time, but we all know that the cost of everything has gone up significantly, and I think that speaks to the work the department's done in the sense of we've been able to bring those numbers down of those incarcerated, keep those folks out through programming, through education, through trades, and then on the same end, when those individuals have a chance to be released, working with them and addressing specifically their needs, rather than just doing all-encompassing. Well, these guys, these first 20 are going into substance use. These next 20 are doing this. No, we're looking at each individual's criminogenic needs. We're looking at each individual's needs from community-based, and how can we specifically address the issues those individuals have, so that when they do have that opportunity to go out, they have the best chance for success. Yep. And I think that's where, under Director Washington's leadership, we've grown so much over, however, the last 10 years, really seeing the programming, the education grow to where it is today.
Yeah. I think just in the 10 years that we've been running our program, I believe when we started in 2015, that summer, the number of incarcerated in Michigan was about 38 or 39,000. And within 10 years now, it's closer to 32,000. And so we've not only been depopulating our prisons in Michigan, but we've also dramatically increased the programming. And so even in thinking of colleges and universities, there's a consortium now in Michigan of colleges and universities that are offering programs in Michigan's prisons. When we started, there was basically 2 programs, maybe 3, and by this fall, there'll be 14. And if you think of it in terms of the number of prisons in Michigan, it's 26. And so 14 of the 26 prisons now will have these programs. And so we've seen decrease in population, increase in highly, really excellent programming for this. Has this been one of the biggest changes you've seen, would you say, in your career? Because, you know, incarceration tends to kind of follow cultural trends, political trends. Sometimes politicians really want this language of getting tough on crime, and that kind of revs everything up. Other times, rhetoric works the opposite way. What are some of the big changes you've seen, and how do you think you account for them?
Well, yeah, I mean, when I think back to when I started and when I was working as an athletic director, some of the program, and I use this as an example, you know, we had a drama club, we had a debate club, and it was great, and the guys absolutely loved participating in it, and they would get a certificate. That, you know, that doesn't transition to the community.
Yep.
Today, an associate's degree, a bachelor's degree, you take Vocational Village, anybody that's participating in a trade in Vocational Village is getting a state or national license. They're getting interviewed for jobs prior to being released to the community. We just held our National Wardens Conference in Grand Rapids last week, and we were fortunate to do a live virtual tour from Grand Rapids to Parnell, and one piece of that was we had Employer Waste Management who had just made a job offer to one of our individuals getting ready to parole, and they were sharing that live to all the wardens on a national level. And that happens quite frequently. So, you know, the drastic change from getting a paper certificate that says, yeah, I completed 12 weeks, again, that was meaningful. Yep. But now you're getting things that transition to the community, that an individual walks out, and I've got associates now, I can transition to bachelor's, or in Sean's example, I've got a bachelor's, now I'm working, you know, towards a master's, or I've got my CDL license, or I have, you know, a national or state license in heavy duty diesel mechanic, and now I can go out there and make a living wage to support myself, to support my family, to take care of my kids, and I'm not worrying how am I going to get food on the table, how am I going to pay rent. I'm now in a position, like all of us, that we want to be. Yep. You know, and that's the whole goal. And I don't, that's always been the goal, but to get to the point where now we're putting people in a position to have that opportunity. Now there takes some, you know, the individual has to have, you know, the want as well, but we're setting folks up for success. And I think, you know, that is one of the biggest growths I've seen in my time.
And that's been more recent.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yep. And just so folks know this too, it's getting bipartisan support in this state. And so if you think where we are politically, it's for something to get bipartisan support, it's really remarkable.
Yeah, and I guess I would, with our vocational village, we have vocational villages at the Parnell Correctional Facility where I'm at, in Women's Huron Valley, Ypsilanti, and in Ionia at MTU. You know, one of the things that we really do, and Director Washington opens the doors to those facilities with state reps, state senators, bringing them in, showing them the work. It's one thing to talk about it, but to come in and see the work that's being done, the quality of work with the quality of equipment that we're using, and quality of instruction, really, it doesn't matter who you are. Yeah. You know, you understand the benefit of that.
Right. Sean, basically same question. You were incarcerated for nearly, 35 years. You went to prison in 1990? All right, there it is, 1990. Look at that. Full stop. So you've experienced a lot over that time and a lot of changes.
Yeah.
You were there
Yeah.
when Michigan peaked at over 50,000.
Yep.
Were you aware that was happening?
Yep.
And what was that like for you? What has been the experience for you over nearly 35 years?
Well, it's about programming and the purpose of the MDOC, right? People who are in prison generally need to be in prison. But what is the purpose of being in prison? If you just want to warehouse us, then, that's fine, I guess. But it's not good for society. It's not good for the humanity of the person you're warehousing. When I first went to prison, lifers couldn't get into programming. I was at Michigan Reformatory, and they had a small engine repair, and I said, I wouldn't mind getting a small engine repair. And they said, okay, but you'll always drop to the bottom of the list, because if someone has an out date, they go above you. So you sat around, and idle hands are the devil's playground. And you sat and you thought about ways in which you could do something. And generally, it wasn't stuff that you were supposed to be doing. And then in the mid-2000s, that began to change. So programming was offered to people with life sentences. And sometimes it was just a college that came in and offered a pro bono class, right? Just a free class. Sometimes it was a church group. So in the 2010s, you had groups starting up all over the place. So this fostering of relationships, it started before Calvin, right? It started with groups, church groups that came in and wanted to be a part of the lives of the men who were in prison. Celebration Fellowship at Ionia, that sowed the ground for Calvin, right? This was a place, Ionia was an amazing place. Let me tell you, for all of the bad things in Ionia, they allowed church. They fostered faith. If you wanted to go to church, you could go to church. And Celebration Fellowship was there. It was fertile ground. Yep. So when Calvin came in, it was a place where that ministry could be practiced, yep. Right?
Sean, do you want to say a little bit about Celebration Fellowship, what it is?
Yeah, Celebration Fellowship is a unique form of church in prison. Some people identified that what happens in prison is people often come in and they tell you just how bad you are, but how lucky you are because they are there to bring you Jesus Christ. So you are filthy and dirty, but don't worry about it because we're here to pull you up out of the muck and the mire, and we'll tell you about Jesus. And it doesn't matter that the people that they're talking to have been serving Jesus for the past 15, 20 years of their lives. So it gets old, and the ministry doesn't work very well, and people who watch it from the outside don't want a piece of that. And then along comes Celebration Fellowship, and what they did was they hired a pastor whose congregation were prisoners. And then people from the outside said, hey, we would like to be a part of your church, and they would come in and worship with us. So they didn't bring the gospel to us, they shared the gospel in our church. And we did Bible studies in the hallways with them. And I was a member of that church for almost 10 years, and never once did I feel like somebody was trying to make me less than human. And that is an amazing thing, to share Christ with people who love you, who build thick relationships with you. And that's the type of thing that prepares you to accept that when you get out of prison. So if you're in prison and you're isolated all the time and you never feel like you are connected to anybody, getting out here can be overwhelming. But when you have these thicker relationships with people, whether it's in a college program or a vocational village, or even some of the church programs that have been started up, you learn what it means to relate to other people in pro-social ways, to use the secular terminology. This is valuable. This begins re-entry even before you get out, because it teaches you how to be human. So one of the things we do in Calvin, once you graduate, you identify which track you want to be on. Now, I have to say, ministry has been left behind. There's not a whole lot of work in the ministry department for the graduates from Calvin. Celebration Fellowship has trained 2 Calvin graduates in ministry. Their job, their purpose is to serve their community in a pastoral way. This is huge. This is amazing, because the people who are serving are people that are just like the people who are being served. This is like Perkins going in to serve the communities that you're helping, right? Living in those communities. So this is an amazing thing to happen, right? This is what the pro-social aspect of this education is all about. So one of the things that we do very well, though, are peer mentoring. So at Ionia, there are vulnerable populations, RTP and ASRP prisoners. These are people who are marginalized. They're people who either have mental difficulties, mental disorders, mental health, or they're developmental disorders. So a lot of fetal alcohol syndrome, a lot of autism. And these people are often left behind. They're ignored. General population prisoners sometimes take advantage of them. Sometimes they take advantage of each other because they're a population that doesn't really know how to interact. And one of the things Calvin has done, the MDOC has used Calvin's graduates to help this population. So the mental health population that are often social isolators are taught how to interact with each other. They're shown how to interact with each other. And this improves their quality of life. The people with developmental disorders are shown how to respond to each other and relate to each other in healthy ways. And this increases their quality of life. And this is what we are being equipped for in programs like Calvin, to help others have a higher quality of life. Because this is a good in and of itself. Right? I will also mention that those prisoners who are developmentally or struggle with mental health issues, they're a huge part of our Celebration Fellowship population as well. They would come and it's not like they don't want something better, right? We often think that people who struggle with mental health issues or people who are developmentally disabled don't want anything better, but they do. And we just have to give it to them. And that's what the Calvin graduates and Celebration Fellowship and other programming, that's what it does. It gives them something better. And I think that is what the ultimate goal of the MDOC should be, is to show people who are incarcerated that there is something better. Because that's what government should do, is show people that the way they live their lives can be better. And we're starting to do a much better job of that. A much better job. You see it in the way that the facilities are less violent. You see it in the way that the people in the facilities have something to do with their lives. They have plans and dreams and goals. And that has to be fostered. Okay, I'll shut up.
So I want to pick up on something now. Your comment is that government should help us be better people and so forth. And part of why we're even here is to think about the intersection of things like faith, the good life, the public square, politics. So now this is a question for both of you. It seems to me that there are at least 3 ways in our society that we think about incarceration. For some, they take the approach of, hey, you're a bad person, you did a bad thing, we're going to lock you up and throw away the key. You deserve it. That's one side. The other side says, my word, who knows how you were raised or the context and all the different things that made you who you are. And In fact, prison really should not be a response to bad behavior. We need a different response. Some would even argue for the abolition of prisons. And then there are those kind of in the middle that say, well, we probably need prisons in our society. Maybe some form of punishment is the right thing. At the same time, we need to consider truly rehabilitative practices. If we're in the public square right now, how would you navigate those sets of concerns, positions, and conversation? It's a big question. And eventually we're going to open it up, too, to see what folks here have to think. But how would you begin to navigate these sets of concerns, the questions that come with it, given that you basically both have 30 years experience in prisons, but on the opposite sides? So you're coming with a lot of wisdom and experience on this one. Warden, would you like to go first?
Sure. So a lot there,
Yep,
what
lot
you just
there.
said. But you know, when I look at it, and like I said when I introduced myself, I've had the opportunity to work both on the outside with individuals who have paroled and are out in the communities, and then obviously inside the facilities. And the other thing I would say is, you know, we don't decide who comes to prison. We don't decide who we're getting. We don't decide how long they stay. You know, that is part of the courts and their sentence, and then, you know, then it becomes, you know, they come under jurisdiction of the Department of Corrections, and then that's when we kind of take it over from there. Having been in the community, having worked in the community where I'm living in parole and probation, you know, there was times where I would go to a grocery store, go to a bowling alley, and I had to see guys on the caseload. And some doing very well, others struggling. And as an individual who would be out with my family, I want those individuals to be as prepared as possible to live a law-abiding life. So I've taken that perspective while working inside the facilities, in the sense I want to give these individuals that are incarcerated with us the skills, the tools they need, that when they do return to the community, they have an opportunity to be successful. Whether that's some form of faith-based programming, whether it's education, whether it's something, you know, a specific trade, whether it's, you know, working with family reunification. You know, sometimes it's simple as, you know, strengthening that relationship, like Sean's talking about, with their family, with their mom, their dad, their sister, their brother, whoever it may be, so that when they get out, they have an opportunity to go to a place where they'll be able to set themselves up for success and, you know, live in a situation where it's positive and go back to an impositive environment. What we don't want is guys going back with no education, no skills, no trade, and go to commercial placement. It's very hard to be successful in those scenarios. While we have them, it's our job to identify whatever specific issues there may be, address those issues, specific programming, education, whatever, trade, and prepare them to return to the community. So, you know, I don't know if I've answered your specific question, but I believe however long we have them, we're going to put them in a position to be successful when they return to the community.
Right. Sean, what do you think? Again, big question, lots of things to navigate there.
So to start with, let's talk about rehabilitation. So in order to rehabilitate somebody, we have to assume that they have been habilitated, right? And that's an assumption that we can't always make. So in the prison system, there's a program that has been running for quite a while now called Chance for Life. Started out of the Detroit prisons. Often this is derided by people. People see the program and they're like, oh, well, that's ridiculous. Because they have their first module is communication. And they literally have a pyramid, and they say there's a speaker, there's a receiver, or a hearer, or a listener, however they want to put it, and the message. And most of us are going, yeah, that's pretty obvious. But if you've never been taught that you need to be quiet while someone is talking and listen to what they're saying, then that can be revolutionary. And if you're thinking that nobody's like that, they are. I was working out with a guy who was a facilitator in the Chance for Life program, and he's telling me just how ridiculous he thinks it is when a guy came up to him and said, I can't thank you guys enough for this program. I never knew that And I was like, there you go. So sometimes that's what it takes. It's that beginning of habilitation, of socialization into the way you should act as a human being. So the more programs that we foster that help people become fully more human, the better off that our society will be. Because when we come back, it's great. I love education. I'm a huge fan. But ultimately, it's about being a better human being. And in some cases, that means learning what that is. Learning how to be a human being is a fundamental part of our lives. And sometimes we have to get that in prison. And the more prisons the system helps people with that process, the better they will be when we let them back out into the streets. Because that first part where you throw away the key, yeah, I'm not a big fan of that, obviously. Because that was me, right? I was the guy they threw away the key, and then they didn't. So, but I'm also perfectly aware that you can't abolish prisons. We need them. They serve a purpose in our communities. But they have to perform their function. And for a long time, that was broken, and now it's not. It's getting better. It's getting much better. If it wasn't for programs like CPI, if it wasn't for Celebration Fellowship being able to come into the prisons, I wouldn't have been prepared to get out of prison. Because I literally had 35 years in when I got resentenced to 35 years. So I saw the parole board and was given a parole. And if I hadn't have had those interactions, those relationships, I would not have been prepared because I was never allowed to take any programming. So when they finally said, yeah, lifers can take something like CPI, that was amazing. That was revolutionary. I don't know if we're supposed to say revolutionary in a setting like this. But the thinking is revolutionary, right? You're thinking outside of the box, saying, hey, we have a huge population of people who are serving natural life. What can we do with them? Hey, I know, let's put them to work. Let's give them something to do with their lives that will make them more human. So guys like Wilson, Rivera Bay, guys like me, guys like James Hammett, they have these sentences and they have the desire to help other people. I mean, stop and think about that for a minute. These are people who committed crimes against other people who now only want to help other people. That's an amazing transformation. And those types of transformations are happening in every single prison where there are programs. And I think that that is a valuable thing to foster in this culture, in this society.
Great, thank you. One last question, and then I want to open it up. But this Little Scandinavia thing, it's interesting, right, that there have been more interest in different states with thinking about incarceration very differently from how the U.S. does it, places like Norway, Germany, some others. Do you think, again, they're doing this pilot program outside Philadelphia at a medium security prison, about 1,300 prisoners there. They've got about, I think, 50 or 60 guys in one housing unit with 6 lifers who are their peer mentors. And again, they're cooking together, sharing life together, they're doing laundry, they're painting their rooms. They're living, as it was said, more of a normal life. Do you think it would have merit? Do you think it's even possible in the U.S.? Could we get our heads around that politically, culturally? Just reflection on that.
Well, yeah, and I spent a little time, you and I had talked about it a little bit and spent a little time researching that myself. And, when I think, and it was community-based, focus on community, same with what you're looking at with CPI and how we get to that point. when I look at our college programs now, when I look at our vocational villages now, one of the things that we promote and talk about is really that sense of community. There's components of that we're doing today at our facilities here in Michigan. When you look at a vocational village or a college program, we're doing housing specific for those individuals. So, for example, a vocational village. We have a housing unit that's designated for all individuals that are in vocational village. Now, those individuals are like-minded, thinking alike, same goals, goal-oriented. They're living the same type of lifestyle. They're getting up each morning at 5 o'clock in the morning. They're going to their job every morning at 6 o'clock in the morning. They're working a full day till 2 o'clock. Then if there's other things they have to do, programming, education, they have to restructure their day around their job, so to speak, to do their programming, to do their education. And then they're coming back to the unit, and there's things that they have to work on in the evening. But they're all chasing the same thing, and they're all working towards a common goal, which then helps with that sense of community, because there's days that, we all struggle going to work Monday through Friday sometimes. We don't want to get up and go to work every morning. They have the same challenges, same issues, and sometimes there's good days and sometimes there's bad days, but there's 160 guys or 140 guys that are going through those same things, and you've got guys that have been in it 10 months, a month, or a year, 18 months, and you've got guys that are now just getting into it. And so those folks that have been in that program for a longer period of time can help guide them and stay on the right track, rather than, I'm tired of this, I'm going back to whatever it was I was doing. You focus on working with one another, building one another up to that common goal, and now you've got that sense of community. So, like we talked about beforehand, the three of us were talking about, we don't have ovens in our housing units. But we do have a group of people working towards a common goal to be successful and ultimately get out into the and be successful when they return to home. So there are components, I think, that we're doing today that, mirror what that is.
Yeah, exactly. Right, that's really well put. Sean, what do you think about the Little Scandinavia project?
I don't know. So they had the Toomey program at Brooks and at MCF. And I know that at MCF they had a faith-based unit back in 6 Block. And the people were all the same way, like-minded. They lived together. And those guys, I wasn't in that, but I observed it from the outside, and that's the type of program that will, people they're like-minded. They're there, they're sharing, in this case, they're sharing the Bible, they're sharing the Word of God with each other, but they would shut down the day rooms and do Bible studies, and nobody complained. They would sit there, they would do Bible studies. It's a pretty amazing thing. If people are oriented around the same goal, then it'll succeed. One of the reasons that I think in those other countries that it works is you have a kind of a homogenous culture, whereas we don't have homogenous cultures here. We have a very diverse culture, and when you have that, you have differing interests and differing goals. So the question is, how do we get people to have the same goal? Yeah. How do we orient so this is, I'll tell you guys, this is the number one question of CPI from the time we started, is how do we reorient people towards the good? Towards the correct good, right? How do we make people think that money is not the ultimate good? Or power, or drugs, or whatever other good they've been striving for their whole lives? How do we reorient people towards the good? And I sure wish I had the answer to that, but I don't.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, I want to open it up to see if there are questions or comments and kind of now extend this conversation. So I believe there are 2 mics available. And so if you would just like to raise your hand or signal, somebody will get you a mic and you can go for it.
Yeah. So, question for the Warden Nagy. Okay. So Dr. Chaffee was talking about the little Scandinavia. So in your experience as a warden, because, I just came out of prison, I did 30 years of prison, right? And I graduated CPI 2022. The way, in my experience, I saw it would be almost impossible to accomplish something like that without buy-in from the staff, obviously, right? So you, from an administrative position as a warden, what does it look like if you're trying to get your officers on board and genuinely feel like they're participating in that community? Because they have to undo all the training that they've got, the paramilitary training, the adversarial training. How do you, as a warden, negotiate that?
Well, similar to what I was talking about, where we have some components of that with the vocational village. Also, when we implemented the vocational village, and still today, and with education, I mean, there is pieces of that you have to work with staff to understand. They have to understand the bigger picture. And one of the biggest challenges we have, in my opinion, with folks that work in correctional facilities, when Sean or yourself are released and they go out and you do what you're supposed to do, guess who never sees that? The guys that have worked with you for however many years, 35 years, I'm not sure how long you did. Those folks that worked with you every day, they don't see all that success. They know you never came back, out of sight, out of mind, but you're out here doing what you're supposed to be doing. What they do see are what? The failures, right? We oftentimes see that failure. So being able to portray, and we've done a good job over the last however many years with strategic plan and making our staff aware of what ultimately our goals are. Why are we doing these things? What is the benefit for the corrections officer that's working in B North, working in the vocational village? What is that benefit to that individual? Why are we doing these things? Why are individuals going to trades programs and when top of the line trade program inside a facility? You have to be able to articulate the why so they understand the benefit and the greater good of what we're trying to accomplish. That's very difficult. We're a massive organization that's very difficult. There's a reason we don't have 26 vocational villages and we only have 3. There's a reason there's, only so many education programs. You have to get to that point where you have enough buy-in for those folks, and you don't want everything saturated. You want there to be some charge there. And it's just, similar to the little Scandinavian model. You have to be able to articulate that why, and for staff to be able to see that benefit, and just learn and adjust to that process. So I wouldn't say any stretch of imagination is easy, but we're definitely made some great strides, and our staff are very proud of the work that's being done today in a lot of these facilities.
I believe, yeah.
Thank you. One thing that comes to mind as I'm listening is labels are important. And it seems almost like the label of Department of Corrections is a label that maybe should be looked at. But my other question is, Sean, maybe how do you get from people coming in with an attitude of I'm stuck with this, I'm not gonna work my way out? There must be a group of people in the system who never take advantage of the programs, right?
Yeah, that's a good question there. I've always seen it since these programs began as a tool in and of themselves. Their very existence allows the department to tell who is prepared for change and who is not. If you have 12 college programs and 3 vocational villages, on offer and you don't take advantage of a program, then I'm guessing you're not ready to get out of prison yet, right? Because these are ways in which you are being offered a chance to change, right? A chance to succeed. So these are great tools for the department in themselves, as well as what they do for the individual who is participating. So these are multifaceted in their benefits. And I'm hoping that that's something that everybody recognizes, that these programs are good on many different levels. I'm not sure if that was a rant or if that answered your question.
You've commented on the changes over the years, and I'm wondering, on the political side of things, as you have to go, and the superintendents and the head of the Department of Corrections who's here, as you have to persuade politicians how they're going to allocate funds, and have you seen a change in how politicians react to the success of some of these programs and financial issues in terms of how they want to allocate support for these programs?
Well, that's a component of the area where I'm not necessarily involved in, but I would say this. I know that Director Washington and Kyle Kaminsky do a great job of communicating what we're trying to do and what we're trying to accomplish and to get the necessary funding, and they go through the budget hearings and so forth. The one thing, like I said a little bit earlier, is we do a very good job now of bringing folks in to see the work that's being done, to understand. You got to have data to support your request, right? I mean, nobody's going to give us this amount of money for this if we don't have data to support that. And we've been able to articulate over the, I think Vocational Village started, our first one was 2016 at MTU in Ionia, and then we expanded to Parnell in 2017. Being able to see the startup of that, and then to be able to see the growth to where we're at now. And last year we opened up another building at Parnell and added a couple more programs, and we're getting ready to add a program or two hopefully this summer. Being able to show, okay, if these folks participate in Vocational Village, our recidivism rate goes from 22% down to 12%. If these folks, I think we've now had 1,100 individuals complete one of our vocational villages. Our employment rate, if an individual participates in Vocational Village, is 70%. So you have that data to support what we're doing. Like Todd talked about earlier, the benefits of an associate's degree compared to a bachelor's degree, compared to no degree at all. Seeing that piece of it. In the long run, while it might be some cost up front, we're saving all of us a lot of money by keeping folks from returning to prison, whether it's through education, whether it's through a specific trade or however. But yes, there's a lot of work that goes into that piece of it, whether it's bringing folks in that are involved in providing, the money and allocations for budget, or it's, being able to go there and articulate that through different hearings.
I'll add to this. So over the course of the program CPI, we have had lots of politicians, state politicians, visit our facility, and that's priceless. They can see it. It's very concrete. And as far as even the narrative that we produce around this, we've had the good fortune, several of us, to go to Lansing and give testimony, and I actually did it one time with Director Washington. We were there. And the beauty of these programs is there's something for everybody, meaning this. If you're interested in the humanitarian concern, we can talk to that. If you're interested in the budget, we can talk to that. And so we've become well versed in saying, hey, if it's important to you to say that these programs ultimately save taxpayer dollars, we can do that and we can show it. Or if you want to talk about a better quality of life, which frankly, if a prisoner has a better quality of life, if there's less violence in a facility, one thing we haven't talked about yet, it's a better facility for officers and staff. And that's important. And so over the years, we've had officers say to us, gee, it used to be I would go to work and I'd be wondering if I'm going to get physically harmed today. And it gets to a point where they can say, you know what, that's not my first concern now when I go to work. That's a huge win. That's a huge win. And so the beauty of these programs, we have multiple talking points, and it is getting political traction, at least in Michigan, I know that.
I just want to go back to the Little Scandinavia things and just reiterate a little bit of what Sean said. So I lived in both Scandinavia, in Sweden and in Germany. So the culture, as Sean was saying, is different. It is a bit more homogenous. It is changing since even I've lived there. But I think the other thing is it's more of a socialist type of a setting where it's much more communal in nature, the culture, and I think that lends itself more to that communal sort of aspect of Little Scandinavia. But I think the other thing, which is a bigger thing, is money. I think we would have some big problems here in an individualistic country like the United States, having a tax rate of 67% like we do or did when we lived there in Sweden. And the tax rate in Germany is also quite high. So I think there's a number of things. I agree with you as a psychologist. Yes, 100%. That's the way to go. But as somebody living here in this individualistic society, I have some concerns that it probably wouldn't fly as well as it would in those countries. Yeah.
No, that's helpful. Any other questions or comments?
All right, we can call it. We do have some refreshments outside, so take some time and continue the conversation. It's also a gorgeous West Michigan sunny day, so we're probably going to get back out to that. Thank you so much for coming this afternoon. I hope that you will put the Henry Institute, different social media things on your, whatever it is you put those things on, and keep track of what we're up to. And would you join me in thanking our panelists one more time?